All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Sales Enablement Live. My name is Felix Krüger, and thank you so much for joining. So today we talk about a topic that I'm really excited about, which is strategic sales tech sourcing, and why that is so relevant. We'll talk about in a second. But before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick shout out to everybody who has been joining the previous live streams. Thank you so much. It's been a great addition to the podcast, and we've received some awesome feedback. People saying that they found it super useful. So yeah, I hope you find this one useful too. And please let me know if you got any feedback. You can let me know if you got any questions in the chat of this stream. So we're live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And yeah, just drop any questions that you might have along the way in the chat, and I will attempt to answer them as part of this live stream. So before we waste any more time, let's dive right in. I've got a few slides prepared. Again, we talk about strategic sales tech sourcing, and as part of the agenda today, I want to talk about three key things. Right. First of all, we want to talk about the sales tech landscape. So, what does the sales tech landscape look like today? What is important to understand about the sales tech landscape? Then the strategic approach and how that strategic approach can contribute to you minimizing the risk of introducing new sales tech to your business and make it as strategically as valuable as possible for you. Yeah. So let's get started with the sales tech landscape. And you might be asking, why are we talking about MarTech growth and the growth in the marketing technology landscape? The reason why that is important is because history currently really repeats itself in the sales tech landscape. Yeah, so you can see here, this is a breakdown of the MarTech landscape between 2011 and 2020. And between 2011 and 2020, we've seen a growth of just a measly 150 platforms back in 2011 to now in 2020, 8,000 platforms, that marketers have to navigate and to really understand in order to make strategic buying decisions. And exactly that is happening in sales tech right now as well. I think the reason why MarTech has evolved earlier in the technology space is because marketing has traditionally been quicker in picking up technology trends and in adopting technology than sales. Yeah, sales for a really long time, even after the emergence of the internet in the late 90s, was still really focused on relationship sales and the old way of doing business. But now, increasingly, and especially with COVID-19, more and more sales teams are actually forced to step up their game and become more efficient and use technology to do so. Yeah, and when we look at what is happening right now in the sales tech landscape, you can see there's a lot of vendors out there, or there's organizations out there that also analyze the whole landscape and categorize all the logos and attempt to really make sense of the whole space. And what you can see is that essentially there's a few vendors that actually attempt to do that, and the number of logos on these charts is also increasing rapidly. So now we currently have just around 1,700 logos, as far as I'm aware. That's the last number we've heard about, but this number is increasing fast. And one characteristic that's also similar to what's been happening in the MarTech space, which is not only related to the growth of those logos, but also to the nature of that growth, is the kinds of platforms that are out there. Yeah, and initially, what you see, there's always a few major players that attempt to solve a lot of problems in one platform. And then there's always an increasing number of niche players that essentially adopt certain features of those bigger platforms and attempt to be more niche in their approach. So what you'll see over time is the majority of the growth is really driven by those niche players that attempt to solve for very specific problems in a very specific niche, with very specific features that don't necessarily have the holistic view of that entire problem that they're attempting to solve. Yeah, so I think the niche characteristics that you'll see in those categories, they'll be the same as in the MarTech space. Now, generally speaking, it is important to looking at those kind of landscapes. It's really important to really understand the classification and how these logos are organized, because that will broadly help you to navigate which areas you kind of look at, and which vendors might be relevant for you to solving your problem. Yeah, and we'll talk about how to be structured around that as well. But I just wanted to call that out, that those landscapes are organized and classified in those ways in order to just provide a broad structure that allows buyers to easier identify the kind of logos that they should be looking at when sourcing tech. Now, when it comes to some of the categories and the sort of growth that is expected, those are just some numbers that just really emphasize what sort of opportunity there is in market for vendors. So the biggest opportunities seem to be in the sales engagement space, with a estimated market size of 5.6 billion by 2023. So it's just around the corner. And then in other areas involve sales intelligence and also sales enablement. Yeah, and those are numbers in the billions, and that's why you see platforms raising more and more money, and investors really pushing into that space. What that means for buyers, though, is that there's much more pressures from the vendors' side to actually generate revenue if they get more investment as well, which also might mean that there's so much revenue pressure that not all pitches are necessarily made in the interest of the buyer. So that's what we're here for today, to really make sure that you are enabled to make the right buying decision for yourself. Now, in terms of the actual investment or the categories that buyers are investing in, this is a research conducted by Ring DNA and RevOps Squared, and it's called 2021 Revenue Operations and Customer Acquisition Benchmark Report. And the report looks at which of the kind of technology categories buyers are looking to invest in the next year. And you can see here that there's a lot of categories that have really high numbers. So in the 30% kind of space, you're looking at CRMs, sales engagement platforms, sales intelligence, and ABM, ABS platforms kind of being the key focus. And then the other ones then don't have such big numbers, but they're still significant. So you can see, generally speaking, what that tells us is that there's a whole lot of investment being made in the sales tech space, and it's essentially an arms race for a lot of organizations to essentially build their sales tech stack and increase their capabilities on that front. What that means in terms of averaging investment per month per SDR or AE for revenue technologies is that there's, again, that number is increasing steadily. So you can see here that those numbers that I've called out, it's over 50% of organizations spend $200 US or more per month per sales rep. And those are really quite significant numbers when you think about it. And especially, 19% of organizations spend $400 or between $400 and $500 on technology for their team. And then there's an additional, almost 20% that spend even more than that. Those are quite significant numbers. And it also tells us that that there's significant investment being made on that front. I have spoken to some vendors in the past that actually take those numbers on a country basis as an indication for the market potential. So what they see is that the lower that number is per sales rep, the greater the potential for them is to gain traction in that market. Yeah, I think I think it makes sense from the vendor's perspective. But from a buyer's perspective, I think it is worth asking: does it really make sense to continue that arms race and just blindly invest and continue to throw money at the lack of sales efficiency, or is it worth to be more strategic about the approach and actually aim to keep that number steady, but make smarter decisions instead. Yeah, and again, we'll talk about how to be strategic in our approach from here onwards. But the bottom line is the same. I think there's no point in just continue to throw money at the lack of sales effectiveness. But from a sales enablement point of view, it really should be the aim to be more efficient in our approach, and that also covers the sales technology side of things. Now, I briefly want to touch on the reasons for introducing SalesTech. Yeah, and the basis for those reasons should always be the buyer journey and the sales process. Yeah, when Kruger Marketing develops sales enablement strategies for clients, we always take the buyer journey as a basis. Yeah, so we map the buyer journey, which is an approach that we would generally recommend for any sales enablement departments. We outline the buyer journey, the different stages that they go through, the information needs that they have along the way, the kind of stakeholders that need to be involved along the way, and then design the sales process accordingly. Yeah, so the sales process needs to be mapped against the buyer journey. Yeah, and once you have that understanding, it becomes suddenly much easier to identify the objectives of SalesTech for your organization and really articulate for yourself why it makes sense to invest in certain technologies. Yeah. And some of those reasons could be to increase outreach efficiency, to prioritize high quality leads. If they're marketing generated, for example, you'll be able to utilize data to qualify those leads and identify where you should focus on. Increase prospect engagement. That's another common one, especially from a content curation point of view, and deal rooms. That's another topic that's really hot right now, and that I also think a lot about. Then there's the to incentivize consultative solution design, reduce friction during the closing stages, and enable, renew, upsell, and cross-sell. So those are all typically objectives or problems that sales enablement would look at and try to solve for when they saw SalesTech to address the buyer journey and the sales process. Yeah, but there's always a real reason why it makes sense to introduce SalesTech. And when I talk about the real reason, I talk about the business objective. Yeah, and I think this is a mindset shift that a lot of sales departments and sales enablers need to make if they really want to have a seat on the table with senior executives. And there's a lot of talk about that sales enablement should have a seat with senior executive leadership and the C-suite. And I really strongly believe that this is, this is not a given, but this seat on the table with senior executives should really be earned. Yeah, and the way you do that is by really aligning with their objectives and really attempting to address those business needs with your sales technology. Yeah. And there's always three key business needs that you can address with sales technology. There's one, increased business competitiveness. Yeah, so being able to be more competitive in the marketplace and capitalize on revenue opportunities. The second one is to reduce operational costs. Yeah, by increasing efficiency or by cutting out manual tasks that can be automated or made more efficient, and achieve compliance. Yeah, so especially that's a topic, especially in the data space at the moment. When you think about GDPR, for example, that's another reason to to invest in tech in general and sales tech in particular. Yeah. So whenever you talk to senior executive leadership of a business, and that's obviously always desirable, especially if you want to have a seat on the table with senior executive leadership to gain more budget and therefore be able to think more strategically. Those are the three key areas that you should always be looking at when you argue your case. Now we finally get to the juicy part of this talk, and this is really about the tech sourcing strategy. Yeah. And this really is a way of sourcing tech that allows you to do all the thinking up front rather than being on the back foot and just take whatever the vendor is presenting to you and then ask the question, does it make strategic sense? Yeah. So what I propose in order to be more strategic about sourcing tech is to be on the front foot instead and do all the work up front to really clarify for yourself, for the business, and for all your stakeholders, what the strategic objective is for sourcing your tech. Yeah. And there's a few steps involved in that. Yeah. So number one, you should be clarifying your business objective. Yeah. So, and clarifying your business objective should mean exactly what I spoke about earlier. So those are things like capitalizing on opportunity to gain a competitive advantage, reduce operational costs, or increase compliance. Yeah, so those are kind of the business objectives that you should clarify, and it makes sense to really early on, clarify these in your tech sourcing journey in order to make the right strategic decision for your business. Yeah. The second part is the sales objectives, as we touched on earlier. So those are kind of the objectives that you're trying to solve for, or the problems that you're trying to solve for your sales team in sourcing tech, which obviously feed into the business objectives. Then you should look at the alternate strategies considered. Yeah, and the alternate strategies considered don't necessarily need to involve technology. Yeah, and this is a bit counterintuitive because we're talking about tech sourcing and being introducing sales tech. But one of the questions that senior management will always ask from you, and this question or the way you answer that question will always have a really strong impact on the way you're being perceived by senior management and the senior executive leadership within your business, is does it actually make sense to invest in tech, or can the problem that you're trying to solve be solved in another way? Yeah, and alternate strategies considered might be doing things manually, involving a professional service that might be able to solve the same thing, or doing nothing, for example. Those can all be strategies that are alternate to sourcing tech. Yeah, and really clarifying them for yourself and thinking through those different options again really increases your credibility with senior leadership and make sure that you're really strategic about the way you tackle this exercise. Then next up, you should really think about the solution scope, yeah, and gathering requirements and really making sure that you're clarify for yourself and you're thinking what the scope of the whole solution should be for your business. Is really important to really avoid what's being considered scope creep. Yeah, and if you start a sales conversation with a vendor, and they present a solution to you, and suddenly from all sides, like everybody gets keen on certain features that don't necessarily make strategic sense, but just have that shiny toy or shiny object effect on people, then suddenly you have that scope creep, and you suddenly have to deal with way more than you initially set out to. Yeah, and that's why it makes sense to really define the scope when you go into the sourcing exercise, and to be really strategic about it. Next up is the budget. So of course, you will always have a budget in mind that you want to spend for your team. So that might be defined on a departmental level, depending on where the budget is coming from. If your sales enablement team has your own budget, then of course, that's a guide. Also considering what sort of other investments you might need to make throughout the year. Generally speaking, I've spoken to a lot of clients and people in the sales enablement space that really look at budget from a investment per sales head point of view. But again, this will be specific to your respective organization, and this will differ significantly. But again, it makes always sense to really define a budget that you want to spend before you go into the sourcing exercise. Then next up is terms and conditions. And from a terms and conditions point of view, those are really the conditions that might be defined by your procurement organization, or might be relevant to you as well, which is essentially just the terms of the deal. That might include any warranties, any exit clauses. This is generally terms and conditions from a buyer perspective are generally designed to reduce risk of the purchase. And any risk that you can think of that you might encounter along the way is worth capturing in the terms and conditions that you're aiming for. And again, rather than leaving that up to the vendor to define, it really makes sense to really think about that early on. The worst case scenario is that you go through the entire exercise of sourcing tech, and then towards the very end you get the lawyers involved, and then the actual conversation stretches out and you can't make a decision because they negotiate over the terms and conditions. So the earlier you can clarify that for yourself, what the requirements for yourself are, if you're a sales enablement tech person that sources tech, or if you need to work with the procurement organization, depending on the size of your organization, it really makes sense to think about terms and conditions early. Then another aspect is also desirable qualifiers. And when I speak about desirable qualifiers, what that really means is the kind of qualifiers beyond the solution that your vendor might be able to offer. And those are things like the ability to deliver other professional services, for example, the ability of the vendor to integrate with existing systems. It might be the way the customer service or the client success organization is structured, and the way they deliver the service. What sort of potential for growth there is, for example, if you expect your organization to grow quite fast, how quickly can the vendor grow with you? What sort of investments you expect them to make, and then also, most importantly, often what sort of cultural alignment is there? And I think this piece, especially if you think about the size of the sales tech landscape, becomes more and more important. If the vendor can display an alignment from a cultural perspective, this is often a shorthand for the ability to solve problems for your organization, because they understand the way you think, they understand the way you operate, and having that cultural alignment can really be powerful beyond just the solution scope and the other things that we just talked about. Now, in terms of the kind of departments that you want to involve in actually developing that strategic that strategy for your SalesTech sourcing, there's kind of four key stakeholders that you want to involve. First of all, the end users. So from a SalesTech perspective, it's most likely to involve the sales reps. So it makes sense to engage them either by running surveys to establish certain requirements, or by creating a panel of sales reps that are involved in the sourcing process. Procurement, we spoke about that, so that's really important to involve early. And from that point of view, again, it's just important to involve them early on, depending on the size of your organization, to really reduce friction throughout the whole sourcing process, because you just want to involve any or clarify any requirements that they might have as early as possible throughout the process. The P&L owner, of course, from a business perspective, it's really important to involve, just simply because you want to make sure that you meet that person's needs. That's crucial to get approval for the budget. And from a P&L owner perspective, we spoke about it earlier, that person cares most about the business needs and the business objectives. So that's really crucial to create alignment there. And then the fourth party can actually be multiple parties, because it's the effective department heads. Yeah. And that might be any department that's adjacent to sales and sales enablement. So that might be, for example, your marketing department, product marketing, or customer success. If they're affected by the new technology in any shape or form, it's also important to involve them in developing that strategy and sourcing that technology. Yeah. And I should also do a quick shout out to World Leader Sales. The kind of the last couple of things that we spoke about in terms of defining the strategy and the stakeholder management. This is an inverse and a modified version of the smart sales methodology that they have developed. And their methodology is designed for sales teams. And we've essentially created the inverse for our business and utilize that methodology to also source tech for our clients. So what I just spoke about is a modified version of that. So Joe Marone at World Leader Cell, if you're listening, shout out to you. What you guys are doing is awesome, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Now, you've defined your strategy, you've aligned all your stakeholders. Now it's time to actually go out and reach out to the different vendors that you think might be relevant to your strategic focus of the sales tech solution that you want to introduce. Like those kind of sales tech landscapes that are out there can really be helpful. Just be sure about the kind of category that you're looking at, or if there's no specific category that you can define, just think about what sort of adjacent categories might be relevant to you when you check out vendors more closely. Yeah, and just when you look at sales tech landscapes, it's also really important to be aware that some of those vendors that are actually curating those landscapes, they actually pay to play in some cases, and some of the highlighted tech logos that are out there might not necessarily be highlighted because they're the best solution, but because they have sponsored their placement. So that's really something to be aware of. Now, once you then talk to vendors, you've got your strategy, so you should be really clear about what your needs are. You can share as much of that strategy with the vendors that you speak to as you want. But generally speaking, again, to have as objective view as possible to actually assess vendors and compare vendors, what we always recommend is creating a comparison scorecard with the kind of aspects of the service or the solution that you're really looking for and that are important to you. When we work with clients and sourcing technology for them, we typically use a weighted scorecard that allows us to compare solutions side by side and weights certain features or aspects of the vendors depending on the importance. And we score that from 3 to 0, 3 being a game changer feature, which is absolutely amazing. 2 would be required for baseline benefit. 1 is a nice to have but not crucial, and then 0 is irrelevant. And if you do that, suddenly you take that objective perception of certain features and those that eliminate those shiny toy syndromes that you often have in buyer teams, and really create an objective view on the benefit that vendor is able to provide to your business. And we would, in each case, recommend utilizing that sort of scorecard. Now, that's it for for my content. If you guys have any questions, please make sure to drop them in the chat. Jonas has been dialing in from Minneapolis. Thank you so much, Jonah. Again, if you got any questions also in the follow-up, please make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Felix Krüger. Or you can email me at felix@krugermarketing.com. Always happy to answer questions afterwards as well. And just quick shout out. If you want to join those kind of sessions, please make sure to register for them on the stateofsalesenablement.com. We have a link there always to the latest Sales Enablement live session. Also, if you want to hear about expert interviews that we conduct in the sales enablement space, so we interview business leaders and sales enablement leaders, please make sure to subscribe to the State of Sales Enablement podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And also, we are looking at relaunching the business actually in the new year. So we're currently still looking for, our pipeline is full until early or late January actually, and but we're still looking for partners and also potential clients for February and onwards. So if you consider sales enablement as a service and actually engaging a vendor like Kruger Marketing in sourcing technology for you or driving other sales enablement initiatives, please make sure to reach out. And we're also looking for partners in the areas of sales content development, sales technology, and also training and coaching. So if you want to partner with us on that front, please make sure to reach out. We service clients pretty much anywhere. There's an overlap with Australian business hours, so that's anywhere between Dubai and Phoenix. So please make sure to reach out. Again, thank you so much for listening today. It's been a blast as always. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much.